neuro-linguistic programming. And in NLP, in the linguistic part, there's masses that you can learn about what people say, the words we use, that tell us a lot about ourselves as well as other people. But today, this session is called Small Words and Big Meanings, and it's just looking at some of the everyday words we use without thinking during the day. Something happened just now which I found was interesting when you were talking about a sub, when your discussion about a sub. I think, Sue, you said, well, it's only a word. What is it that somebody's coming in and sitting down? Does it matter if they're called a sub or not? The words we use, actually, when we're talking somebody's language, are really, really important. So, again, what Mark would see as a sub in his head is, well, I don't want this to be called, you know, and it's not confrontation or anything like that.
It's just that Mark's authoritarian.
I'm a libertarian, mate, you mean?
Authoritarian.
Spell O-R-R.
But it's an interesting point, and you probably know this yourself, that if you're playing back somebody's words, to use their exact words and what they mean to them is important, and also they may not have exactly the same meaning to you as they do to the other person. Okay, so small words and big meanings. I've got a little handout thing to give to you at the end of this, and some of you may know this already, so it'll be a refresher, and some of you might be new to it. But if you can all see this at all. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, don't think of a blue tree.
Yeah. So we're all thinking of blue tree.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll pay you later.
It's the first time we've been paid this month.
Invoice, it's been a problem.
Yeah.
You've got the mail. So if we say don't, our subconscious can't easily process a negative. So to think of what we're not to think of, you think of don't think of a blue tree, we have to kind of picture the blue tree and not think of it. Does that make sense? So if you imagine a little girl walking, or a little boy walking across the room with a glass of water, and they're walking across quite well with this glass of water, and all of a sudden you say, don't drop it, don't spill it. What happens? Starts to shake. Any of you ever been in that situation when someone says, don't look now, but what do? You immediately look. So it's kind of, it's using the word don't. Be mindful of it. A tip is, if you, instead of saying don't, just like thinking of a little girl walking across the room, walk carefully. Don't look now. Rather than say that, keep looking at me while I'm talking to you. You know, so it's almost giving a direct instruction, for want of a better word, rather than saying don't, so remembering what don't can do. Does that make sense? Okay, so state what you do want the person to do rather than you don't. Another tip for that, and one that I find really useful in all sorts of ways, it can be when you're setting goals, or just if you have one of those days you think, oh God, I shouldn't feel like this. I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to be, do, or have something. Anyone ever had those feelings? Yeah. If you ask yourself, what do I want instead? So you think, oh, I don't want to feel like this. How do I want to feel instead? It actually focuses you on what you actually do want to feel instead, and it can shift your state as well. So just a little tip there. Going on to but, however. What does that word mean to you when you hear somebody say but or however? An excuse. Yeah? Anything else?
I didn't.
I agree with what you say, but really it's like this.
Yeah, but really I don't. Isn't it? Yeah. And do you ever get that feeling when somebody's talking to you, there's a but coming up, there's a but coming up in a minute. So what's happening when you use the word but, you're negating everything else in that sentence that comes before the but. So imagine you're going to a dentist and you've got an abscess. And the dentist says, right, I can treat that abscess. It will be cured with these antibiotics. But they've got some really bad side effects. What do you think of? The side effects rather than the abscess is going to be cured. So it's thinking about everything in terms of business. You know, you might be, a lot of call centres, for example, will give feedback to their advisors and they'll say, well, you've done that very well, but what you need to do is remember to do the Data Protection Act, for example. So the but you know that very well is we go to it, and all that person is actually thinking about is, oh, I forgot the data protection details. Does that make sense? So that if you think the but negates everything in front of it, so think about how you may want to reword that sentence. When I first learned this, because when God was a boy and I was training communications, we were told to use however instead of but. Has anybody ever heard that before? Use however, it's a lot nicer. It means the same, doesn't it? You've done that very well, however, you know, it means the same. So when
I use however, I very rarely use but. I tend to use it when I'm explaining the rules, however, there are exceptions.
yeah.
Right, and you can get exceptions.
Presentation of an alternative, effectively.
Pardon?
Presentation of an alternative.
Yeah, and I don't see it as a negative.
And again, there will be obviously occasions that this word could be appropriate, and you could use and there as well. So for your example there, Maureen, you said here is the details, and where you would say however there are exceptions, you could say, and there are some exceptions to this, which negates the however. But it's how it, you know, this is just bringing it to your attention of what these words, how they can be perceived. And if it feels right, it feels right. You know, it's
So the however is diminishing the rest of the sentence that you started with. Is that what you,
however can be like that. So it's being mindful of that. And when we use but, I mean, I know some people that actually really build up to a crescendo of a but, you know, but, you know, and it's all right, well, forget the whole, you know, paragraph before that. So it's just being mindful of what those words can do to your message.
I told my wife she got a big butt and I made that mistake again.
Yes. We might need to
So-
That's got a double T in.
now you tell us she's got an and. You got a big hand.
And I'm sure she had an and as well.
What he said big but you can follow it with however.
You must try.
He said, however, I like big butts. You can see it's a very serious group here, Patsy. Yeah.
So again, thinking about where you would use but in most cases, to see if you can replace it with and. I found that a bit uncomfortable when I first started doing it, if I'm honest with you. But it really works. Also, you could stop.
You said, but it really works.
And it really works.
No, she said Did she? All right, with you.
Mark's videoing it.
Fucking lawyers.
Got any lawyers?
Yeah, him.
Just a minute here, isn't it? Keep going. Ignore him. We all do.
Okay.
No, that's because we can't afford him, that's why we ignore him.
Oh, thank you.
Try now. Has anybody heard the Yoda expression, do or don't do? There is no try. And what does that mean to you? If you try to do something, what does that give you the permission?
You're not really committing to it, really.
Spot on. It's spot on both times. You're not really committed to it, and it gives you permission to fail. I'll try to get that report to you by 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's not committed, it's not, and you're not motivated. So in two ways, it's when you're saying it to yourself.
The phrase, we'll try our best, means we know we're not going to do it.
We'll try our best to do it. However, if you change that to I'll do my very best to do it, that if you're committing to do your very best, then you're committing to do your best. But when you say try, it makes it different. Also, it's like when you're doing self-talk, oh, I'll try and do this, I'll try and do this, you know, I will do my very best to. For example, my daughter said to me, she was taking her driving test and she said, oh, well, I'll try and pass it. And I said, Harley, do your very best, that's all you can do. And even her demeanour changed. I was working with a guy yesterday who's going through quite a serious operation. We were just talking about some hints and tips he could use in various situations. And he was really motivated to do this. Until right at the end, he said, right, thanks so much, Patsy. I'll try and do that. And I said, I don't hear any tries. What are you going to do? And he said, I will do it, I will do it. And his eyes looked bright, his whole body language changed, and then I got the commitment. To leave him to say, look, I could not leave him with this, oh, I'll try and do this, because it's a very different state and a very different commitment. So that's again, for yourself, when you're thinking, well, if I hear myself say, try to myself, what do I need to do? And also if somebody's saying, I'll try to do that, you know that they're not committing, so what do you need to do to get them to me? Do your very best to get that report to me on Friday, whatever it might be. Okay? Should and must. A lot of times, this can cause us stress. We might be thinking, I should do this, I must do this. Anybody have that? You know, in your self-talk, I should do this. I should eat more healthily. If you're saying to yourself, I should eat more healthily, how committed are you to doing that? Is it you that's generating that thought, or are you kind of thinking somebody else is saying that I should, or it's an external influence that's making me think I should do this? So if you change that to I choose to eat more healthily, that changes your direction of motivation and your commitment as well. Does that make sense? So it should and must. And I don't know about you, but if somebody tells me I should do something, according to who? Why should I do that? You know, according, you know.
It's terrible for me because I like to challenge things.
It is. It's almost like I'm telling you, you should do this because, you know. So if you are maybe working with people or communicating with people, and you might find yourself saying you should do this, it might be better to say, well, have you thought of what would happen if you did it this way? What would happen if you did it this way? What would happen if you didn't do this? You know, it's just changing that should or must around, both internal language and external as well. Why? Everybody come across the why when we use why? It can sometimes come across as quite aggressive. So rather than use why, a suggestion is to, for what purpose do you do that? You know, just changing the why to maybe something different. How does that work then? What does that give you when you do this, rather than use the why? Has anybody come across that before, or heard that before?
Yeah, because the why is you why.
Yeah, it's making out that you've got it wrong.
It's questioning.
Yeah. Why do you do that? It could be an absolutely ordinary question. You just, why do you do it that way?
Yeah.
You just ask
It comes across as challenging, doesn't it?
It can come across as challenging. It's just that big meaning it can have. It's just being mindful.
Especially if you just use the why without qualifying it.
Absolutely.
Right. Why question mark?
Aggressive, isn't it?
I usually say, may I ask why?
That's because you're polite, Maureen.
Yeah.
The rest
It's
of
just
the
saying evidence, but that's funny.
In a polite way.
Manners are everything, aren't they?
Yeah, because it does sound better than why are you so stupid?
And the last one I've got here is what would make it even better. And sometimes it could be in any kind of occasion we might be giving feedback of any kind, you know. And how many of you have come across the feedback sandwich before? Tell them something they're doing well. Yeah.
But
Give them a shit.
I came across it at Toastmasters. And when we used to be evaluating something, we did it in the form of a sandwich with commend, recommend, commend. Then they did some research and found out that people remember the last thing they heard, which is going back to what you said before. And they changed it to what they call an open sandwich, which was commend and recommend. Because what people were doing then was remembering the commend. The
Recommend.
recommend and not the
Commend.
not the recommend.
Not the, yeah.
So they turned it around again, and that way people were remembering the commendation and not the recommendation, and therefore not improving. And they tried it all sorts of ways, and they just could not seem to get it right. They kept changing the policy on.
Yeah. And I think as well, Maureen, I think with feedback, certainly in corporate, I know that you know, there's different models of feedback, different feedback sandwiches, and people get to know it. And so you're sitting there here, and there's, you know, you're almost like saying, oh, this is, they're telling me what's good, let's build up for what's coming in the middle and then end with a positive. And people kind of expect the actual cycle of it as well. Whereas when you're giving feedback, if for example we take that example of the advisor on a phone call, if you're giving feedback to the advisor taking a call in a call centre, well, what you did really well was you answered the call, you built rapport, you had really got to what the customer wanted. What would make that even better would be if you then went into the details of the Data Protection Act or that. So by saying what would make it even better, what does that do? If you say to somebody what would make that even better, what does it presuppose?
It means you got it right.
Wasn't good enough.
The things that you could think
Spot on.
Yeah.
That you've done a really good job at the, you know, you have done a good job. What would make it even better is whatever that would be. And that's just, again, getting back to your commend and recommend, and it's all in one then. So people are thinking, well, I did do that well, and what will make it better is.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Thank you.